Hi, dear listeners. This is Kate Riga. I'm here to make a quick pitch that you consider becoming a TPM Prime member. TPM has used the member model for over a decade now, and our loyal members are the only reason we've been able to weather the turbulence of the media landscape and avoid the fate that has befallen so many other independent outlets. For $70, you get no paywall, fewer ads, access to the Hive member forum, a members only newsletter, and more. For $140 a year, you get all of that plus no ads at all. Without our members, there is no podcast, not to mention that I'm out of a job. Thank you so much for listening and supporting us. We couldn't do it without you.
Hi, this is Josh Marshall, and this is the Josh Marshall podcast featuring Kate Riga. Uh, but but not for long. Not for long. Don't worry. Don't worry. The podcast is not going anywhere, but I wanted to mention something to you. As you know, we just did our big 25th anniversary thing. We did it a couple weeks ago now, but Kate was away, so we were off from the podcast for a couple weeks. That was back on the 6th and 7th, and as if you were there, you probably know just from listening to the podcast, because obviously we published the podcast that we did live at the 25th anniversary event. I hadn't had a chance to talk about it. You know, if you have the podcast in your feed, you know that you had a chance to listen to this panel that we put on about the history of the site. And I wrote about it in the editor's blog. I really loved it. I hope you got a chance to listen to it. I really enjoyed it. I wouldn't precisely say I learned a lot from it because I was there, right? But I did learn a lot from it. Maybe not in a literal way, but in any case, after we were done with, we did the live podcast, and I guess that's the third one we've done, and after the second day after the party and everything, I thought about it, and I kind of thought we have outgrown the name of the site, where this is the Me podcast and Kate is also the co-host or something like that. It's really a partnership. It's something we do together. We're both co-equals in it. So I mentioned to one of my colleagues who kind of oversees, branding and coming up with names for new things. And I said, let's come up with a name that I don't know what it will be, but something that puts Kate and I on equal footing as we're the co-hosts of this podcast. So we don't know what that name is going to be. I mean, maybe it'll be the Josh and Kate podcast. I have no idea. Or, maybe, let my name still be first in order or something. Can I have something? But anyway, I have no idea what it's going to be, but I just wanted to let you know that because I've been sort of thinking about this in the back of my mind, and the 25th thing was so fun. It was so fun doing another one of these live podcasts with Kate, and I just thought it was time. So I don't know, sometime in the next few episodes, we'll announce what that is. The team of our colleagues who kind of comes up with those things is going to work on it, and we will see what they come up with. So that is that. And thanks again to everybody who came out for the 25th thing, the show night and the party night. We had a great time, and of course we always appreciate your support. So Kate, what are we talking about today?
So, in the couple weeks that I was out, we had a little bit of like an emotional roller coaster, it seems, from afar. I was out of the country, so I, was not getting my kind of usual daily diet. But it seems to me what I missed was, I kind of went out on the aftermath of the elections, right? So the left is giddy, the right is either demoralized or trying to just kind of hand wave away. It's off year, who cares, kind of thing. And then the shutdown ended pretty soon after that, which unleashed, kind of putting Democrats back where they're most comfortable, feeling demoralized and mad at Chuck Schumer and the other kind of dissenters.
Back in their comfort zone.
Exactly. And then since then, it feels a little bit like the center of political gravity has shifted again with all of these markers of this theme we've been talking about on the show for a while, but kind of Trump weakness, some kind of fraying of the MAGA coalition. And that has become epitomized, I think, by the shocking news of the Marjorie Taylor Greene resignation that I have to say really surprised me, even as a storyline that's been prominent and her kind of either credible or performative disillusionment has been a big story for a few weeks now, if not months. The resignation was not something that I think most people would have called. So let's just kind of start there. And the big question that's still percolating that I haven't really seen any super compelling answers to, which is, what's going on with MTG? What's the game plan here?
Yeah, I was as one often is, I was online and suddenly I see this thing, Green resigning from Congress, and I was like, What?" I mean, like, there's a bunch of storylines that I think we all know are always in the range of possibilities, right? I is Trump gonna invoke the Insurrection Act? Is this thing gonna happen? That thing gonna happen? And this was just never. You can imagine her doing all sort. There's nothing too crazy that you can imagine her doing, but this fairly pedestrian thing never occurred to me and never occurred to anybody. And I think that when it happened, there was I saw a bunch of people saying, "Oh, she's running for governor. Oh, she's running for senate." Like all of these sort of like 12-dimensional chess, sort of like, "Oh, it's not this simple. This is like," or there's some bombshell coming out, right? All the ways to sort of uh contextualize this weird news as the part of something bigger that would make more sense. She's looking for a promotion. She's doing this. She's doing that. But I think we know at this point, no, she resigned from Congress, or she post dated it so she can get her I guess it's her pension. I think you need to be in for 4 years to draw a conventional congressional pension, and that's the logic of. I think she's resigning from office on January 5th or January 6th or something like that. I don't know when it is exactly. But yeah, and it's. I mean, first of all, it's just so weird because I don't know, resigning from Congress is kind of low energy, and that's sort of the one thing that is not Marjorie Greene. She's high energy. She's weird. She's she's doing weird shit constantly. And and it's also kind of equivocal and ambiguous because on the one hand, she has rebelled, and she went rogue, all this kind of stuff we know about, and we know how that's part of the fraying coalition and all that kind of stuff. And yet the fact that she announced her resignation a week after Trump finally like declared war on her, it's kind of, off narrative for me a little, but it's hard not to see that as showing that Trump still has juice. You can't survive if he's against you. So, there's a dimension in which it's not that different from what is it, Mark Sanford, was it Corker? I got him. It's amazing how people fade. The guy from Tennessee. Uh, so Trump still has the juice, and yet she announced it in this kind of lengthy "fuck you, fuck all of you, I'm awesome, and fuck you" and sort of stuff. So it's kind of a mix, and it's just weird, as you say.
Yeah, and I would say it made me adjust my priors a little bit because my overall kind of reaction to all the MTG stuff was just that it was so bizarre how everyone from really across the media spectrum was treating her so credibly. taking at complete face value that she had become, disillusioned with Trump, and it was the Epstein files, and she was so disappointed, and she had met with the women who were abused, and that, I found that explanation to be like pretty I just thought it was so strange that that's how everyone decided to handle this person who's been like such a lunatic in such a kind of carefully calibrated attention grabby way for so many years, that now, because she's taken an about face to some kind of at least pretense of rationality, we should take that at face value now. But I have to say, this latest move has kind of mixed things up for me a little bit, because my assumption was she's doing this pivot because she has aspirations outside of her district, and she knows that she's too Looney Tunes to survive a general election, whether that be statewide in Georgia or a 28 presidential bid. And so, she's manicuring her appearance and tempering, and doing a little bit of making a kind of the risky play of breaking with Trump a little bit early with a finger in the wind, that a lot of people are going to be doing that soon, and that this was all more or less political calculation.
Yep. Yep.
And so the resignation kind of flew in the face of my theory a bit, because all the people was like, well, she's going to run for governor. Like, okay, you don't have to resign to do that. That like one does not really follow the other there. And now I think I've come to maybe more of a hybrid theory here, which is some combination of, as you say, Trump is promising a primary, right? So what should be a pretty rote election for her is going to become some measure more stressful. We know, or that she said she has been receiving a ton of, hate and death threats from the MAGA base since the breaking with Trump. Um, I think you do have her trying to be the tip of the spear of new MAGA. That is definitely in the mix. I think the Epstein stuff is in the mix. I think Trump not doing anything to support her when she was kind of testing the waters for a statewide run earlier this year got her pretty pissed at him. I would imagine there could be some feelings on her side of, I've been unflaggingly loyal to you for this long, and what exactly am I getting in return? And then on top of that, I think there might just be some more pedestrian kind of fatigue with being in the house. She had reached this kind of plateau when it was McCarthy who did all this
Yep.
stuff to kind of court her, give her power, put her on a powerful committee. And I think she got the sense there that's like, okay, I'm not kind of on my own as a thoroughly despised wingnut anymore, right? I'm going to
Not
have
untouchable. I'm not
right.
I've gained respect in the
Yeah.
Republican world. Yeah.
And then, but her committee kind of petered out and ended up not doing anything. And now in the Johnson era, she doesn't have the same relationship with him. And then this is all combined with kind of the classic political headwinds of most House Republicans think that they're going to be in the minority after 26. So it's even kind of more demoralizing. So now, my kind of best guess is that it's a stew of all of these factors. And I still think I'd be so completely shocked if this is kind of the end of her political career. It's still too much of her behavior reads as someone who is eyeing a general electorate for that to make sense to me. But I think there's probably a little more kind of like genuine disillusionment and tiredness of serving in this house that is played into her calculation.
Yeah, what when Sanford and Corker and, the various other people who Trump has annihilated and, like, tossed their carcass off the pyramid and all that stuff, their sign-offs are generally kind of like, you know, a little thank you to staff, "Okay, I'm bye." I mean, it's, very low energy. And what she said definitely queued her up, set her up for a political future, but seemingly not in the near term. Like, I would be very shocked if next week she said, "And this is why I am running for Senate from Georgia." Like, it really, really doesn't look like that. So I'm kind of, and what is it? She's dumb, but she's not stupid. She knows who Trump is. Eh, she knew she was uh sh that something like this was going to happen. This isn't her like, wow, he said he's going to run a primary against me. Like, oh no, I mean, she knew what she was courting. And I think I'm basically where you are. I mean, all that stuff like, she's got her finger on the pulse. She's positioning for the leadership of post-Trump MAGA. This makes perfect sense. That's nothing how this seems to have played out. And in addition, the thing with I do think it's possible we're going to see a significant number of retirements in the next 2 or 3 months from Republicans because clearly the mood is very, very bad. They seem to be waking up to the fact that they have really no role in government at all. Like nothing. At least the Senate is there on these, kind of 60 votes and continuing resolutions and all this, there's kind of something that goes on in the Senate and the Senate and all that, and all the different stuff. But Johnson keeping them out of session for what was it, 6 weeks, plus, that they turned everything over to Trump. They made the speakership, Johnson made the speakership essentially into a presidential appointment who serves at the president's will. So it's not fun. It's They know it's probably going to get less fun next year. Um, but it's one thing to retire. It's another thing to resign in the middle of your term. That is always weird. With that happens when someone's ill, when they, it's always a little weird when you like, oh, a job I couldn't turn down came up. I mean, dude, you're a United States representative. That's a pretty sweet job. But just to kind of say I'm done, I just can't. Is weird, and it does. I did a post a few weeks ago, kind of saying maybe the Epstein thing kind of undid her. I still don't really believe that, but it makes it a little plausible to me that kind of like, if you are a true believer in all the conspiracy theories and all the stuff, having Trump turn on a dime like that, I wonder if it just kind of rocks your understanding of things. But I also agree with you. Is like that has a sort of a cinematic coolness to me, right? That it fits with it fits with the crazy, it fits with the conspiracy theory world and all this kind of stuff. It can't not be the case. She was pretty bummed having Trump basically say to her, you're fun to hang out with at parties, but you're not coming over for dinner. We don't like you that much. But it's weird. It's weird.
Yeah, I guess the part of her performance that I find most eyebrow raising is this whole I just don't think you go from someone who relishes fighting as much as she has throughout her career because remember before she was in office she would chase AOC around the hallways at the Hill or got in that fight with David Hogg like right after the massacre and everything. I mean, I just don't think you go from a person who kind of loves confrontation like that to someone who goes on The View and is like, Nancy Pelosi did a good job for her party. Like I can't see a personality transplant like that really taking place. But I mean the Epstein stuff, I'm still skeptical just because when these Republican women come out and they're like, well, I absolutely will not betray these abused women. And then you're like, okay, so the couple dozen who accused Trump that doesn't perturb you at all, right? It just has to be, uh, you know, um, but the counter argument to that is, well, Trump tried himself to bully Boebert, to bully Mace, to get them to kind of back off, and they wouldn't do it, and
Yeah.
to some
Yeah.
degree, there is a tailwind on the Epstein stuff
Mhm.
that defies the political gravity that has defined almost every interaction between Trump and Republican Congress.
Yeah, at some level, obviously, even in the MAGA world, obviously the whole Epstein thing is very charged, and it's going to be weird saying like, if Trump did it, it's okay with me, you know, guys get freaky or something like that. But you don't have to. There's lots of other female uh members of Congress, Republican women in Congress who just they're kind of like keeping their head down, right? You don't have to do this. You don't have to like grab onto it like this. And it's interesting thinking about each one of those because um uh Nancy Mace, there's something weird going on with Nancy Mace. I mean, she's her behavior has been increasingly the odd for a while now. So her thing is kind of strange. It's interesting with Boebert. Boebert is an interesting contrast with Green in this case because she defied him, but she went to the meeting in the White House, which God, I'll give her credit. That's in the context, that's a tough meeting to take. And then she came out and she hadn't changed. She hadn't changed her position, which God, I give her a little credit for that. That's, everybody bearing down on her and she didn't change. But she put out this statement like, I had a thank you so much, President Donald Trump, for having a meeting with me. You know, something like, we agree that we've got to get to the bottom of this. And thanks for agreeing with me. And I'm still going to vote for the discharge petition. So she went out of her way to I love you so much and we actually agree about this thing that we totally obviously don't agree. So like, don't hate me. Don't hate me. Please don't hate me. I love you. I'm loyal. There used to be in the Spanish Empire, right? When there's a whole complicated thing. They used to there was this legal phrase where is like where it's I obey but I do not comply. And this was a way for like the colonial governors to say, I'm not rebelling. Uh, I'm loyal and everything. But if you knew all the details I knew, you would agree that I have to not do what you're telling me to do. So she kind of did that. And so it's interesting, both Boebert and Green defied Trump, but in very different ways. Right. So it's that was interesting to me.
Which could have been writing on the wall as well because erratic behavior notwithstanding, Mace did the same thing, is trying to thread the needle of being pro release the files and pro Trump in the same breath. They'll do the kind of refocusing back to, Bill Clinton or whatever. It'd be like, no, this is really all about the Democrats type thing. And Green, did not. And also went to the big press briefing with Thomas Massey, who's become, kind of a professional Trump agitator, and
And Ro
Ro Khanna,
Khanna,
who's a
yeah, yeah.
progressive Democrat. So
Yeah, yeah. So she knew what she was getting herself into. And it is I guess we can say that if you look at this arc, I think you can tell she was making this up as she went along. And by that I mean this was not some grand strategy. I think there was some mix of fatigue and deep disillusionment that uh I don't want to call it erratic behavior, led to behavior that seemed to be an evolving change of opinion about the big picture that led to a lot of stuff that just seemed I mean, the thing about that appearance on The View, there was I still don't know if I am understanding what she said because she's not the most wildly articulate person, and in an interview it's sometimes a little hard to understand what someone means. But this is what got me thinking about the Epstein thing is that one of the View hosts asked her something to the effect of, Marjorie, what about the conspiracy theory stuff? What about the Jewish space lasers? Kind of all of all of that. How you got to answer, but what was that about? And she said this thing where she said, "I was another victim of online misinformation." You know, And I'm like, "Wow. Wow. Like, what?" Oh, and, that was to me, that's even wilder than saying, "Maybe I misjudged Nancy Pelosi. She did a pretty good job." Because, um, I didn't I didn't know quite what to make of that beyond maybe she does think she was taken in by stuff. I don't know why you say that, right? You're not gonna it's just a weird thing
Mhm.
to say, and that's what at least got me thinking that the possibility, even though again, I can't really believe it's the case, that, seeing Trump's about face on Epstein, which, as we know, is sort of like the myth of the MAGA movement, just shook her in a way that she couldn't quite process.
I don't mean to be the cynical voice here, but also I was bamboozled is kind of a convenient way to not have to
Oh,
apologize for or explain.
of course it is, but 100%. But you also since when has she needed to explain?
Right. Yeah.
Right? I mean, this is not someone who feels who seems to feel, under that pressure, and it's a funny way because she was using the, it's almost like she's up there and says, every accusation is a confession. She's she's like he's using the verbiage of the woke left, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, it was just very strange.
Yeah. I mean, again, unless she's kind of positioning herself for a general electorate. But I would say the thing about it that is so surprising is like I'm really bummed out that she's leaving, which never would I ever think I would say that because she's been so uniquely toxic in this time and very on the forefront of kind of doing the kind of winky violence stuff towards Democrats and all of that. But watching her these past few weeks has been so fascinating because I'm just so interested in what happens to MAGA post Trump and like what does that ideology look like? How do you take this coalition that is so loosely tied together and really just bound by fealty to Trump. What does that look like in the future? And I really I don't think they're going to be able to kind of get through 28 without at least gesturing to some kind of, if not like detailed wonky democratic-esque white paper type stuff, like some kind of a governing thesis, beyond carrying Trump's legacy. And it was so interesting to watch her kind of fashion this like very isolationist, anti-Israel, America only faux populism type thing. And I really wanted to see that come under any kind of a stress test because
Mhm.
I mean, conservatism is so at odds with populism in these like really fundamental ways. Like, is it gonna be enough for the MAGA people who try to put themselves in this mold to say, you know, my adult children will not be able to afford healthcare, right? No one can afford housing. It's out of control. Is it enough to just kind of carry the grievance on that stuff and never have to even like faint in the direction of, God forbid, social safety net esque, fixes to these kind of things? I mean, I think it's gonna be something to watch, and Trump, his probably crowning success is his ability to be successful by bringing in this grievance stuff and, you're the little guy and you keep getting stepped on and I'm going to disrupt without ever having to kind of take it to a more concrete step. And maybe that's how it'll continue. It'll just be someone charismatic enough to that movement in that vein that they never really have to put up or shut up in that way and just
Mhm.
kind of the way he rode on his kind of faux businessman persona for all this time, somebody else will be able to kind of replicate that performance. But you would think, someone like Marjorie Taylor Greene, what are her bona fides, right? Like she didn't play a businessman on TV. You would think that at some point she has to show some kind of at least gesture of competence to be able to address these things.
Mhm.
But now that she's left Congress, her kind of the standoff with Trump is gonna
Like, who
just
cares?
drain away any
Yeah.
importance. It's not gonna get coverage, right? Like, I mean, she's not coming at him from the inside anymore, so it's kind of like, well, a lot less interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think, the part of that really resonates for me. Well, first of all, I'm not sure they're gonna come up with white papers, but what I do think is that Trump is a painful as it is to say, a unique historical figure. He is. He just is. And you are not going to have, wow, we came up with another guy who really kind of brings it all together in the same way. I'm not, certainly not right away. That's just not going to happen. I mean, in some ways, the person who would agree with me most about this is Donald Trump, right? Um, but the interesting thing, well, what really uh, again resonates with me about what you just said is that once people, both political movements in different ways have a, a a a short list of the top aims and a script of the ways you talk about the top aims. And once you set that aside, or once that doesn't fit for you, you start having to kind of address each thing that comes up on its own terms. I don't mean from in necessarily in an honest way, but you don't have a script and you're kind of improvising. And that improvising is at least interesting to watch, right? And again, I think what I can take from this is that she spent a couple months improvising, and that was that was interesting to watch. It was new. I mean, what is news is, as we say in this business, dog bites man is not news. Man bites dog is news. And she was, the man biting the dog, and that was interesting. And uh, farewell for now, Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Yeah, and I mean, just my last thing is when I think about what the 28 kind of primary field is gonna look like as far as we can, like, make any guesses thus far, and you just think, what are gonna be the fracture points, you know? It's like, what would a JD Vance versus a Marjorie Taylor Greene contention rest on, right? I mean, and I think a big part of it is going to be how Trump got really into foreign stuff, foreign policy stuff the second term. I mean, of course, for him because he likes the "I'm the greatest peacemaker in the world" thing. But if MAGA's next turn is to become even more fiercely isolationist, I mean, this is like Green was the first congressional Republican to call, the Israel Gaza stuff a genocide. Like
Genocide. Yep.
if
Yep.
that's kind of an implication of where things are going, I don't those are just kind of fascinating fracture lines. And we already have these inclinations of um leaks about the administration staffers kind of being like, well, now Trump's going to be all domestic all the time. We're not, we're focused here. That was kind of the reaction after the elections. So I don't know. I just, yeah, you're right. The improvising has been interesting. The test balloons of kind of what this next phase would be really interesting. And I just, the quote unquote disappointment of it all is like, it's kind of hard to see anybody else of the House Republicans, it's not going to come from the Senate. So anyone else of the House Republicans kind of picking up this mantle aside from Thomas Massey.
Hmm.
Um, and his stuff has been a lot less, at least so far, kind of, these more broad ideological test balloons. He's just kind of honed in on like one or two issues and has been a committed thorn in the side on those.
And they're often pretty technical, like, oh, I'm gonna fight, I'm gonna die on the hill of regular order, or these kind of like, okay, I mean, they're like, it- they're not things that get people really kind of gunned up
Right.
in anywhere on the political spectrum. You're probably about to say rightly,
Mhm.
there's a bunch of the other things we got to get to, but I will say this, you mentioned JD Vance, and I was talking to, you know in the weirdness of the moment, Trump seeming to fray all the kind of questions or fantasies that people have about Trump's health and so forth. Um, I had a number of people saying to me recently, like, "Oh, what if JD becomes president?" I mean, there's what if he's the nominee in 2028, but what if something happens and he's the incumbent president in 2028? And it focused me on the fact that if you went from this kind of political moment that we seem to be in to JD Vance becoming president, I think he is not no one likes the guy. This idea that he is clearly the heir apparent, he's the nominee, he's the next guy, that may be the case, but he 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 is not likable in a way that I think is pretty broad across the ideological spectrum. So if you had a situation where you've got this kind of malaise, this kind of broad sense that things aren't going great, which is not just a kind of a anti-Trump opposition feeling. I mean, that's clearly very broad in the public. Um, they still have Trump, and Trump has whatever magic he still has left with the MAGA world. I think things could go really, really badly very quickly for the Republican Party if JD Vance becomes president by some event before 2028, or is the nominee, because he doesn't have retail power. I'm pretty confident of that.
Yeah, and in that same vein, there was one story I wanted to mention that the New York Times just did this kind of examination of Trump's public schedules and how his public events have declined precipitously from the first term, something like 40%. His days have gotten much shorter. He's only kind of ever working noon to 5 now. Um, the weirdness with him getting an MRI and never talking about it, the kind of it seems permanent bruising on the back of his hand that he's always covering up with makeup. He keeps falling asleep in these like Oval Office meetings and everything. And he got really mad about that story, because one of his favorite talking points is kind of beating up on Biden for being a, weak, sleepy loser in comparison to his own masculine vitality. But it is, it's just the unescapable gravity of how old he's getting. And I probably before Biden, I don't know that I would have thought that the appearance of age and frailty could be so powerful in bringing down a president. But now that we've witnessed that, I mean, if you imagine, look how unpopular Trump is right now, right? And he's kind of sinking on all these metrics, including the ones that have long been his most powerful kind of issue areas. And if you take all of that and remove the kind of energy that he's always had, talking to reporters for like 6 hours a day and calling into Fox and Friends and like truth socialing at 2 a.m. and stuff. I mean, this just reminded me when you were talking about, what if he dies and JD takes over? I mean, what if he just becomes enfeebled in a way that you can't outrun old age when you're in the public spotlight all the time? I mean, that would be just a hammer blow to his power over the party. And I mean, at that point, I think Steve Bannon can talk all he wants about a third term. And, you already have some people becoming um emboldened to start tiptoeing out of line, right? Not a lot so far, but um external events could kind of shove them all back into a little protective ring around him. But you got to think, from the guy who's like talking all the time about if he's going to get into heaven, that this kind of thing is on his mind.
Right. It's funny. I was excuse me. I was talking to a friend, and this friend is without this is not a Republican insider by any stretch of the imagination. But it's kind of on this kick that, Trump is flatlining physically. He may not survive his term, all this kind of stuff. And it's funny because there's this weird duality. If something happens to Trump, you're certainly going to be able to say he had the ankle swelling, he's got this weird bruising, there's unexplained MRIs and trips to the hospital and this kind of stuff. On the other hand, my experience of people who are 79 years old, they're getting tests all the time for stuff. And they've all got this ailment and that ailment and stuff. And those ailments may be serious ailments, but also ones that are manageable and that someone can live easily, maybe another decade with those ailments. Certainly not like they're like on death's door or something like that. But Trump, because he's Trump, has to he has already locked himself into the idea that he is a man of steel and iron, and he is in perfect health, and he can, as you say, he's the anti-Biden, right? He could campaign nonstop for 72 hours without sleeping and still be killing it. So so the things we see about his health, or maybe that he's ramped back his schedule a bit. I mean, he's 79 years old. Of course he's ramped back his schedule a bit. So it's entirely possible. What about me? What's going on with me? Um, it's entirely possible that he's fine for all practical purposes that we need to worry about for 2028, or surviving through 2028. But it's they their need to keep up the idea that he is physically 25 years old requires them to be totally, to cover up things that may be totally fine, right? Like, it's I'll give you an example. Remember when the thing where, with the ankle swelling? When I saw that, not being a doctor, I was like, "Wow, that sounds like bad, like real bad. Like, I wonder what's going on here." And we have a reader who's a cardiologist who I've been talking, kind of getting his opinion on news stuff for like 20 years as health things come up. And what he told me is, first of all, based on what we know, the explanation that the White House doctor gave is plausible. It can be that thing. It would explain this thing. And that thing is, you monitor it for a guy in his late 70s and it's fine. I mean, it's not no problem, but it's manageable and you just keep moving on. So it's, they are a prisoner of the fantasy of, what is it Ronnie Jackson said, he'll probably live to be 200, right? So who knows? Who knows?
And it's just, you don't wanna do that kind of, like, it always does rankle me a little bit when people, like, kind of wish cast online where he, like, I don't know, stumbles while he's walking or whatever, and everyone's like, "That's it. That's the end of the Trump presidency." Like, I mean, when has kind of society ever gotten so lucky? But if he were to turn a corner, if he were to stop being able to perform the way he is now, one thing we've learned from the Biden administration is that there's just no amount of managing that is going to be able to, like, make that not a big deal. So,
Yeah. Yep.
it's in the mix.
Yep.
Okay, the last thing we wanted to talk about is this super bizarre, speaking of like political weirdness, reaction from the Trump administration to this fairly anodyne, kind of, honestly, I thought, a little silly video that a few members of Congress made, all of whom are either veterans or served in the intelligence arms, basically saying, you don't have to follow illegal orders. In fact, you have to not follow illegal orders. And this, comes when the administration is like pretty clearly trying to start a war in Venezuela, and you have, National Guard troops being weaponized against blue cities all across the country. And so, you know, it had like a backing score. It's kind of one of these goofy straight to camera type. I want to be mean. It's good that they're trying stuff and they need to be online and everything. But if there had not been any reaction, this would have been a tree falling in the forest. I can't imagine it was ever going to do huge numbers on social media. Members are doing this kind of stuff all the time. And instead, and you could even tell that sort of by Hegseth's initial response to it. It wasn't that intense. Like, he made some joke about stage 4 Trump derangement syndrome and, whatever. That's kind of usual fare. But then Trump freaked the fuck out about it and started, all caps talking about sedition and punishable by death and, retruthing a hang 'em, that's what George Washington would do type thing. And then Hegseth clearly kind of got his marching orders and then started on the sedition train and on the, you know, we're going to go after Mark Kelly in particular because he's the only one of them that reached who's officially retired from the service, and is getting his pension, so he technically can be reactive dutyified to be
Yeah, they
court
can be
martialed.
court-martialed. Yep, yep, yep.
So, started doing this kind of thing, started saying you're wearing your medals on your uniform wrong, even though it was like a mirrored image, whatever. Just this huge, huge reaction that is completely subsumed right wing media and kind of MAGA world in general, that all seems to kind of center around this frantic, sweaty idea that, Mark Kelly was trying to give out his own orders because he was in the Navy and he's trying to intimidate soldiers into not following their chain of duty. And now all of the members have also been reached out to by the FBI, that they're starting a probe into it. So just this crazy huge reaction, especially given that Kelly is known to have presidential ambitions. And so the White House response is to A, elevate the fact that he's like a pretty decorated veteran, and B, just go completely apeshit on him for the crime of saying don't follow illegal orders. I mean, holy distraction, right? I can't believe this is the fight they thought would be better for them than the various other kind of unfriendly news cycles percolating.
Yeah, I I have a slightly different take on this, and before we started this episode, I mentioned to Kate that, I had gone on Twitter, uh, sometime this morning, and I was reminded that right now in MAGA Twitter world, this is the only story. This is the only story. It is all about this. This is all they're talking about, and they're all on the same blah 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 blah. I think it is it is pretty edgy for sitting members of Congress to publicly say something like this, to in essence saying we need to remind you what's going on, because it is it's aggressive, in its own way, and what was interesting about it to me is that the all the people on there, but particularly the 2 senators, Kelly and Alyssa Slotkin, are the kind of people who, the sort of the blue sky online left are always saying, "Oh, the soft centrists who, kind of always looking to capitulate," and all this kind of stuff. So it was a pretty, uh bold thing for people who, again, within the sort of the intra-Democratic Party conversation, are often seen as sort of softies or trying to reach across the aisle too much and all that kind of stuff. But it is word for word what is in the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and what you've seen circulating online. There's an image that's circulating online of a plaque at West Point, which is sort of like, here is what you have to be as a soldier in the US Army. And, like, the second thing is, like, when the law comes, when there's the law and there's an order, you have to go with the law. So this is textbook. And I I get why they're going I get why Trump is going ape shit. And I do see um why they I get why they think it's gonna stir up the kind of the hardcore, um, MAGA people, but I think the genius of it for them is it is a very crafty way to say publicly, "This is a renegade president who's rogue from the Constitution. He's breaking a lot of laws." And this just by saying this very anodyne thing, it puts it out there um in a very igniting kind of way, even though it's a very anodyne thing. And we know it gets to Trump because in Trump's mind, he owns the US Army. He owns them in the way that he owns the gardening crew at Mar-a-Lago. He tells them what to do and they do it. There's that is him. And I think I don't know. I think even the stuff about the investigations and stuff, great. Fantastic. And I think they had to know they were courting this kind of reaction. And I think it's good because it is bringing to the surface what everyone knows, that, like, Trump is turning the US military into his private Praetorian Guard. And that's not what the law is. And everything that brings that to the surface, I think, is important for the Constitution, but is also good. To say it's good politically trivializes it. It is good to get us to the reality of what is happening. And I think that is good for the political opposition.
That's so interesting because I think part of why it reads so lame to me is the kind of like general military reaction to Trump this time has been so absent in a way that in the first term, you just had more of these, like, especially kind of like retired high ranking people being willing to speak out a little bit more. I guess you also had like the generals that Trump was obsessed with the first time who were pretty high profile parts of the administration and fairly high profile, defectors is too strong a word, but occasional kind of sporadic thwarters of his ambition, and then you had all some of those people kind of speak out afterwards. And it felt to me that the military uneasiness with Trump was a lot more in the bloodstream the first time, and which I have found to be surprising because he's been so much more aggressive in his use of the military this second term. Like, it was clearly kind of one of those regrets he had from first time around, that he only had like the musing thoughts of having troops shoot protesters legs, and was kind of talked back from some of those displays of strength, which he has had no problem deploying this time. I mean, look, my neighborhood is still inundated with the guard at all times. So um but maybe that backdrop kind of leads to your point, which is the resistance from military quarters has been so muted, if not absent altogether, that he is in the place of like, I won this battle. I kind of got rid of the disloyal generals. We know that he mulled doing what he wants to do to Mark Kelly with some of his enemies of those ranks as well, trying to court martial them. And so, that could kind of contribute to the just the tantrum that he had this time, he kind of thought this battle had already been won, right? The military had been fully subjugated. So any hint of mutiny is too much for him to bear.
Yeah, I that's why I think the whole thing was kind of genius, precisely because it is, as you say, so anodyne. This is like this is like saying we're a country of laws, not men. Like, okay, yeah, I remember Schoolhouse Rock, right? It's so anodyne, it's so basic. And yet in this moment, it's very charged because we know Trump is violating it. And it is, I think, the other aspect of this that has been talked about less. I mean, it's so charged because everyone knows this is true. It's right there on the plaque. It's right there in the Uniform Code of Military Justice. It's 100% true. Um, I think the other part of it, though, and this is the part that I think is maybe implicit, but people aren't talking about. But it is also a signal if you break the law saying you are obeying orders, Trump will not always be president. So keep that in mind. Trump will not always be president. So it's also a warning. Um, Implicit, uh, we've have very understandably gotten jaded about the idea that there will be consequences for anything. But again, to me, there's kind of it's a bit of genius because it is so anodyne, but understanding the moment, it is an anodyne thing that is going to get a super strong reaction, which it is. Which frankly, I'm seeing from the right now, oh, cry more, guys. You're so upset that Mark Kelly is going to be investigated. I'm not upset. I'm not upset at all. I really doubt he's upset. I mean, as
I
you
was gonna
said,
say neither
yeah.
is he based on the media circuit he's doing right now.
Yeah, I
So
mean, of course, I mean, he's no dummy. He knows who Trump is. This is like, this is kind of um look, this is the 2028 primary in the same way that Gavin Newsom, all those people say, "Oh, Gavin Newsom, he's just running for president in 2028." Of course he is, right? So, and this is kind of and I don't want to just trivialize it to mere electoral politics. I think Mark Kelly is someone who really believes this and who's probably disgusted um, by everything he sees.
all right.
Okay. Is that all we got for this episode, I guess? I want to thank everybody again. This is our first podcast back from after the 25th. Thank you so much for everybody who came out for our 2-day series of 25th anniversary events. We really had a great time, and it was great meeting so many of you. Some for the first time, some who've come to events of ours before. And I think that's all we have for this week. Yeah.
Yeah. Have a good Thanksgiving, everybody.
Yeah. Have a great Thanksgiving.
The Josh Marshall podcast is hosted by me, TPM reporter Kate Riga, and TPM founder, editor in chief Josh Marshall. The show is produced by Jackie Wilhelm. Thanks to Why Not Jansfeld for our podcast theme song, and thanks to all our TPM members who make this possible. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and subscribe wherever you listen.